Hey K-popers, and welcome back to Hallyu. Can you believe today marks the 100th deep dive? These past 100 weeks have flown by, and today, to celebrate the milestone, I've updated and remastered the 8th ever deep dive on this channel, K-pop's answer to the Sewol Ferry disaster. As we rapidly approach the 8th anniversary of this tragedy on April 16th, I thought this was the perfect opportunity to make sure the truth does not sink with the Sewol Ferry. Now, as I did back then, I'm going to warn you guys again right now, this is going to be an intense and emotional video, so prepare yourself and maybe grab some tissues if you think you'll need them. We're first going to discuss the tragedy itself and then look at the failed rescue that truly made this South Korea's worst modern day tragedy. Next, we'll talk about the massive emotional response from the public and the legacy it left, and finally we'll spend a lot of time looking at how K-pop artists and the industry as a whole memorialized the victims and made bold statements against the government through their music. Trust me, there are some K-pop songs that you will never look at the same after this deep dive. Before we get started, I want to quickly thank Hallyu's honorary producers. If you want to show off your bias group here, share your pics in weekly videos, and join a vibrant Discord community with watch parties, custom emoji, and more, all you need to do is support Hallyu on Patreon. So first, let's talk about the tragedy that befell these poor people. On the morning of April 16, 2014, the motor vessel Sewol was en route from Incheon to Jeju, carrying 476 crew and passengers on board. 325 of those passengers were students from the Danwon High School, and they were on a field trip to Jeju. While passing through a channel, a miscommunication caused the crew to make an extended sharp right turn. Now, the ship should have been able to recover from this maneuver. However, not only was the ship carrying more cargo than it was allowed to, it had also been modified without certification, and its ballasts were not up to date on their required maintenance. Combining all this meant that the ship was not as mobile or responsive as it should be, and as a result it began listing or tilting to its starboard side. Cargo began to slide and fall to the right, and it began an irreversible process of capsizing. When the listing began, the captain made an announcement over the ship's intercom ordering all passengers to stay where they were and claiming that moving would be dangerous. This order was repeated over and over again and never changed as the ship took on more water. And worst of all, the captain himself selfishly abandoned the ship despite those commands and was successfully rescued. The Coast Guard was eventually called in, but more miscommunications between various ports and just general incompetence severely delayed the Coast Guard's response. Now, as infuriating as this situation already is thanks to the illegal operation of the boat and the captain with absolutely zero sense of moral duty, there was another layer to this whole situation. Because as the Sewol Ferry capsized and disappeared below the surface, the Coast Guard and government completely mishandled the rescue operation. The agencies continuously lied about the situation to news reporters, even going on record in initial reports stating that all passengers had been rescued. One of the main concerns for the government was actually staging a rescue that could produce great video footage and make them look strong and like they had everything under control. Actually, saving lives was secondary to that. Fueled by this completely unacceptable goal, the Coast Guard was on a power trip through the entire operation even as the days dragged on. They refused both Navy and expert civilian divers who wanted to risk their own lives helping to search for survivors, and they even rammed other boats that had been sent in to help with the effort. Through all the chaos, over half of the people who were actually rescued from the boat were saved not by the Coast Guard but by private and commercial vessels. The Coast Guard failed spectacularly, and because of all this resistance, it took months to completely search the submerged vessel. In the end, 304 of the 476 passengers and crew died, including the vast majority of the students on their field trip who had obeyed the captain's order to stay put and died because of it. Now, this is very tough to hear and very overwhelming, so I'm not going to go into any more detail about the incident itself in this video, but if you do want to learn more, I've linked 2 incredible documentaries on the disaster below that are well worth a watch. As the days and weeks wore on during that botched rescue, hundreds of parents demanded answers about their children and about what happened, and from their frustration and determination, a movement began. People were appalled by the government's actions, and they adopted the yellow ribbon as the symbol of this tragedy and of the hundreds of victims. In fact, the Sewol Ferry has since been salvaged and is decommissioned in the Mokpo port, and as you can see, countless yellow ribbons line the fences of the port in honor of the victims. Many memorials were set up both at the high school and at various locations around the country, perhaps most notably at the memorial in the Gwanghwamun Square in the center of Seoul. Even 5 years later, in June of 2019, this memorial was still there. I was lucky enough to be able to visit it and donate it to the victims' families while there. In return, I received a ribbon of my own which I have kept with me every single day since then. Now back to 2016, and a report on the incident meant for Park Geun-hye, South Korea's president at the time, was leaked. Its contents were shocking, as even still the focus of the report was not on fully investigating the incident or supporting victims and their families, but instead on changing the public's perception of the government. They even began monitoring and prosecuting critics of the government. This triggered monumental protests, and this mishandling was a major factor in what eventually led to Park Geun-hye being unanimously impeached by the people of South Korea on March 10, 2017. Okay, I know that was really upsetting and heavy and you came here for a K-pop deep dive, so now I want to talk about how K-pop artists responded to this tragedy, how they honored the victims, and how they made sure that Sewol will never be forgotten. As humans, we look to art and music to help us express our emotions and capture our feelings, especially when tragedy strikes and a shared reality emerges for all of us. There have been many such songs released by artists both big and small that accomplish this, and I want to talk about them here. I should also mention that during the weeks after the sinking, no artists released new music to allow for national mourning. It wasn't until May 7th when XOK released Overdose that broadcast and new mainstream music releases returned to a normal schedule. Think about that for a second. The entire K-pop industry just shut down for 3 weeks. That's how big of a deal this tragedy was. So first off, I want to talk about the song The Light by the girl group The Ark. Though The Ark was only around for a year and never really debuted or got off the ground, they will forever be remembered for this masterpiece of a release. The music video depicts a beautiful mother-daughter relationship, with the mother working hard to give her daughter a good life. She always makes sure her daughter wears a smile, but there are limits to what she can do. When her daughter wants a new backpack, the mother refuses since her current backpack is just fine. Then, one day she sends her daughter off on a school trip. Notice the empty bus stop ad as well here. We'll get back to this soon. While on the bus, the students are enjoying themselves, and the daughter even takes a picture with one of her friends, interestingly enough played by IOI member Sohye. Soon after though, you can see the bus swerving and the mother sees on the news that the bus has been in an accident. Her daughter has died along with all of her friends. Heartbroken, the mother is struggling to smile herself. She purchases the backpack her daughter wanted all along and packs a symbolic lunch for her daughter and her friends. As she waits at the bus stop once again, you can see the ad now says violent water, clearly referencing the Sewol disaster. The mother's heartbreak is so vivid and painful, and it perfectly encapsulates how every parent who lost a child in that Sewol disaster must have felt. Next, I want to talk about Spring Day by BTS. There's so much going on in this song that you likely won't realize until you understand its connection to the Sewol disaster, but even on a surface level, this song is all about the unbearable pain experienced when you lose someone you love. Interestingly enough, one of the scenes portrayed in this video is Jimin at the ocean holding a pair of shoes. The sight immediately brings to mind scenes of the divers finding personal effects of the victims while searching the sunken boat, many of which were shoes. This scene in the MV is immediately followed by Jungkook standing in front of a merry-go-round that is covered in yellow ribbons, a clear reference to the symbolic ribbon as well as the fence surrounding the ferry in Mokpo. But the connection goes even deeper than that. There are references in the music video and the lyrics in the song to two specific creative works. One, the short story The Ones Who Walk Away from Malice by Ursula Le Guin, and two, the 2013 movie Snowpiercer directed by Bong Joon-ho. In both of these stories, the world is living in a false utopia where the adult society is living happy, frivolously, and carefree. When the truth is revealed though, it turns out the societies are living in such a way because they're exploiting children, thriving at the expense of the young. This is an obvious metaphor for the disaster. Systemic corruption, greed, and bribery allowed at motor vessel Sewol to depart Incheon without certification or proper maintenance, and who paid the price? Hundreds of young high school students. It's a powerful connection in the context of the video for Spring Day, and it's a bold statement by BTS where they denounce the failings of their very own government. Next up is Red Velvet's song One of These Nights. Throughout the music video for this song, there are constant references to water. The sets reflect this as well, with long thin hallways typical of a large vessel and circular porthole windows. In several scenes you also see members in a small boat, and as the music video progresses, the boat is taking on more water. Like in Spring Day, the lyrics here are centered around someone who has lost a loved one in death and is desperate to meet them again. Near the end of this video, you can see Irene falling after a window bursts and water begins flooding in, conveying the scenes of the Sewol taking on more water as it sank. There are also scenes which depict the members in heaven as well, suggesting one or more of them have died as a result of the events in the MV and solidifying the connection to the disaster. FX's Red Light is also about the Sewol Ferry disaster, but it's more focused on sending a message to the institutions and less about the victims themselves. The songwriter has actually come out and publicly confirmed that the song is a criticism of how poorly the situation was handled at all levels, and it's really obvious in the lyrics. One lyric says, quote, "Listen to the person who's warning you," referring of course to the announcement ordering passengers to stay in place. Another lyric says, quote, "Be the witness of change when everyone is being quiet." This speaks to two things: the major societal upheaval and change that began with the movement after the incident, and the government's deafening silence on the matter. The lyric, "Your excuses of trying your best are just filled with doubts to me," also attacks the government's pathetic incompetence, which was on full display that day in April, and it shows the public was not going to accept their excuses. You can also see imagery reminiscent of 1984, perhaps in a warning of the danger of having a society that's taught to blindly follow orders as the students did on that fateful day. Now, after the tragedy, Block B's Zico was also moved to action. He dedicated his songs Tough Cookie and Well Done to the victims of the disaster and made both songs 4 minutes and 16 seconds long, referencing April 16th, the date of the sinking. While performing at a concert, he also dedicated a rap to a deceased Block B fan who was planning to attend that very concert but lost her life aboard the Sewol Ferry. One final song I want to mention is called You Whom I Love, sung by Shin Young-jae of 4Men. This song was actually composed by Lee Da-woon, who was a victim of the Sewol Ferry tragedy as well. After he died, his parents sent the song to Young-jae, who was their son's role model. Young-jae finished the song and released it, honoring Da-woon in his performance. The sinking of motor vessel Sewol on April 16, 2014 was a national tragedy and a major breaking point for South Korean society and politics. In response, K-pop artists used their talents and national reach to honor the victims and bring light to the injustice and corruption that allowed this horrible tragedy to occur in the first place. It was a shining example of how music and lyrics have the power to unite us in dark times, just as it has been doing in recent years while the world struggles with health crises, war, and inequality. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this updated look at the heartbreaking Sewol disaster and how our favorite K-pop idols responded. It's such an important point in the modern history of South Korea, and it's a brilliant example of how K-pop can be a force for good. As always, thank you so much for watching this deep dive, and stay tuned because there's lots more content coming your way right here at Hallyu. This has been deep dive number 100, the Sewol disaster.